Hello, everybody. I'm Kate Russell. Welcome to this Royal Television Society discussion, TV's production revolution, the rise and rise of virtual production. Invented in the 1940s, chroma key, known commonly these days as green screen, is still used widely throughout film and TV, and in fact by many indie creators too. But now, thanks to modern VXF tools and gaming engines like Unreal and Unity, the creative process is leveling up. Virtual production techniques allow filmmakers to create fantastic digital sets, then use the same technology as used in games like Call of Duty to place the actors within that set with full freedom of camera movement. It is a game changer for the creative process and completely mixes up the production workflow. So whether you're a TV or film professional or just a curious bystander, today is your chance to hear from the experts about how this technology is reshaping the entertainment sector and what that means for the future of filmmaking. I am delighted to be joined today by four experts working at the pointy end of virtual production. We've got Kate Gray, Head of Production Management, NTT Data UK. We've got Steve Jelly, Co-founder, Joint Managing Director, Dimension. Ian Milham is Virtual Production Supervisor, Industrial Light and Magic, and Neil Graham, Head of Virtual Production at Sky Studios. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive into the discussion, I'd like each of you to briefly introduce yourself to kind of frame your experience within this topic. So Kate, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit different from the other three on the panel, but indeed I work for NTT Data, which is part of NTT, which is most likely the largest tech company that no one's ever heard of. But they've got thousands of people working in technology and doing all sorts of consulting, helping companies solve their digital problems. We also have some pretty interesting creative work going on. At our NTT Disruption Group, we have a division called Growthland. They use virtual production. They also do lots of VR and AR and all kinds of really interesting things for live events as well as for films. We also have some pretty interesting sports technology experts who right now are following along with Internet of Things devices, the Tour de France, as well as the Open, which is about to take place in the UK. We have lots of different interesting divisions. They're all focused on tech and making tech work for people. My particular role as head of product management means that I get to work with all sorts of different teams, partners, and our clients to build products that actually solve what our customers, what people really need. And that's one of the reasons why I get very excited about working with engineers and developers and technology, because it really creates magic when you bring the business together and you bring all these different parts to make something that helps people's lives. So thank you for having me today.
Perfect. Thank you for being here. Steve, you next.
Hi, I'm Steve Jelly. I'm the co-founder and joint managing director of Dimension. We set up Dimension about 7 years ago to use real-time engines. That would be Unreal Engine or Unity or games engines to make virtual humans and virtual worlds. So I suppose Dimension operates volumetric capture stages in North America, Europe, and Asia. And for the last couple of years, we've also been sort of pioneering the use of virtual production in terms of LED walls, in terms of simulcam, which is, I guess, AR for the cameraman, and also creating large-scale, photographically realistic worlds in games engines. That's us.
What a brilliant job. Ian.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ian Milham, and I'm a virtual production supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic. And I think probably most people who are sort of film nerds in one way or another have heard of ILM. We're the visual effects company that George Lucas started in the 70s to perform work on Star Wars, and has been a part of visual effects history in all the decades since, and all the way from matte paintings done on glass, all the way through the revolution to computers and so on. And we feel that virtual production is another one of those sea change type of moments where you don't see them come around very often. We're very excited about it. So my personal experience is I was the virtual production supervisor on The Mandalorian, which has become sort of one of the vanguards of this technique because we used it extensively on that. And since then have been working on other features and TV shows to help people be successful using this amazing new tool.
Perfect, thank you. And Neil.
Hi there, I'm Neil Graham. I'm head of virtual production for Sky Studios. I've been at Sky for 17 years now, I think, but my job or jobs before coming into virtual production, I was the executive producer of Sky Cinema and Sky Immersive. So I had one foot in traditional TV production and one foot in the immersive world. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, being part of an innovative broadcaster. I was always tasked with working with new production technology. So about 5 years ago, I started working on VR content production and creation. And in doing that, and in still having one foot in traditional TV production, I had a unique group of expertise in my team. So traditional films, and then working with game engines, Unity, Unreal, to create virtual worlds and to create interactive content. And so probably about 2 years ago, we'd seen that a lot of the skills that have been working on interactive VR were moving into virtual production. And because I had this unique crossover within my team, I worked with Gary Davey and Cameron Roach. We had over at Sky Studios, and said that this is going to be interesting for the future. We should start to take a look at this, and let's use the expertise that we've got in the team. And so it was about 7 months ago, we set up a formal virtual production unit to really look at what virtual production could do for our slate of productions, for our innovation within both production and with the studio facilities that are being built at Elstree.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, all of you. As you can tell, we've got an absolutely stellar panel here. We will have a chance to ask a couple of your questions down the line towards the end. So if you've got anything you want to ask these brilliant people, then just pop it in the chat, and I'll try and bring the best few questions to them at the end of the session. If you don't work in film or TV, you are likely to have heard about virtual production tech because of The Mandalorian, Disney's Star Wars live action TV series that famously uses the huge LED sets to add another level of reality to the VXF. These are known as volumes. So if you hear us talk about volumes, that's what we're referring to. And Ian, obviously you said you worked on The Mandalorian. What is it like working? Is it in a volume or on a volume? What's the correct terminology?
I think either one is going to be fine. That's a bit of a legacy term that is carried forward from the motion capture days, which is a part of the magic trick that makes this all work. It's the negative space within an array of these cameras that they cover. So we just kept that word. People can call them different stuff, but that's sort of what it is. I would say in your question of what it's like, there's actually sort of two parts to that. There's what is it like to actually do production within one of these crazy environments, and there's what is it like to be a part of a production that is using this technique. So when you're actually there in the volume, it's pretty magical. And what I find is what the biggest impact I've seen it have on people is, especially anybody who has done green screen or blue screen work before, it's hard to explain, but you don't realize how much work you've been doing, what I've been calling the imagination tax, just to sort of project what it will be like someday. The DP is only going to light what's in front of them because that's what's in front of them. And then the nerds are going to replace the background later. And then the other person, and in terms of how the staging, the actors, there's nothing around them. They're imagining things. So in many ways, having everything really be there is just a tremendous relief, I think, for everyone, where they're not paying that imagination tax anymore. And we can react and improvise it and do everything. And then in terms of what is it like to be a part of a production on this, I would say the degree to which you'd be excited about has a lot to do with how much you're into the collaboration. Are you excited about the possibility of participating in whatever way you are contributing to a production like this, in participating while everybody else is doing their thing at the same time, and potentially influencing and working along those people? Because you're taking a lot of work that people are used to doing after and putting it before, right? In order to have all that great stuff there on the day, you need to make it ahead of time. And that means the DP is part of lighting it. The production designer and the virtual production designer are working together to create this sort of thing. So it is a sea change in terms of how collaborative it is, which I find tremendously exciting. But there's no question, does have some forcing functions in how we plan and execute these things. Because we've really found now, after a few years of doing this, that the wins creatively, financially, in terms of the speed of everything, really stack up exponentially the more that everyone works together from the beginning to use this as part of their process.
When I was speaking on Twitter over the weekend about doing this debate today, one of my followers mentioned the fact that typically in movies previously, the VXF always happened at the end and you get paid for one shot or 30 shots, like you've got to fix it in post, shall we say. But of course now all of that has to be, that's brought to the front end, and you get what you get on the day. That's I've read that right.
Well, I mean, you're still welcome to do stuff afterwards. There's nothing says that you have to get every shot final on the day. And sure, we still sometimes add aliens or spaceships or, if we're doing something more, in a traditional, because it doesn't always have to be some sci-fi epic, even though that's how it's gotten started. Whatever we're adding later, that can all be still done. But yeah, that's what can be so brilliant is the fact that you're creating this whole virtual world, and then on the day, people talk about these things, and I think they imagine in their head that where it's going to really make an impact is the big establishing wide shot. Look at this glorious 1800s New York or wherever it is. I mean, yeah, but where it's really paying off is all the coverage, is the two people at that cafe in 1800s New York, and you want to be able to shoot, that whole conversation. And yes, what used to be money per shot now can just be had on the day for free, but you've done all that work ahead of time. So there is definitely a transition of thought from billing and working and establishing per shot to more like per location.
The green screen technique, I mentioned at the beginning, and it's been part of the virtual production technology for, sort of until we started using LED walls. You mentioned this sort of bringing back the feeling of being on set, but what does the loss of the green screen do to, sort of things like your ability to choose different wardrobe, shiny reflections in in armor and stuff like that?
It goes beyond just that. I mean, so totally true. And by the way, we have a unique sample here where we're currently doing a show with Ewan McGregor, bringing back, reprising Obi-Wan Kenobi, who he played on a big blue screen set, nearly 2 decades ago, and now he's playing again on one of these sets, and you can see the joy in the comparison for him. And he's already talked about a lot about how much better it is for him. But yes, one of the great things about this whole idea is not just for war, it's for everyone. Special effects, right? You can actually add fog and smoke again. Lighters can add real light. The fact that the real light and the real stuff is there again, and the reflections are true, and that world, all the departments can participate in a way that maybe would have been a problem. And that's a good example with costumes and wardrobe, where they maybe want to avoid something shiny or reflective. Now, go for it. If anything, it only makes better. The Mandalorian starred a chrome ball, essentially, partly for this reason, because you can pay off and you get this type of, actually, I would say that's where you really see the difference sometimes. We recently did a shoot where we were doing sort of just a car process type of work, where we got a car on stage, and everybody knows that all the reflections playing across the car as it theoretically drives along are going to look great. But what I thought looked great were the zippers in the leather jacket that the talent was wearing. Because would you have thought to add that? Maybe. I'm going to bet not. And even if you did, you wouldn't have had the time or the budget to do it. But all those little kicks on every little bit of tooth of that zipper, that's what made it feel real. Everyone would have done the glints on the car, but the thing that made it feel real compared to a blue screen was all that stuff in the zipper. So yeah, all the time, what I love about this is the fact that you're bringing back together that sort of let's make a movie feeling, because the departments don't have to tiptoe around each other so much. And if you've spent this time working together to create this scene, yes, you can add smoke. Yes, you can add real lights. DP, you don't have to pre-plan a motion-controlled camera move in order for the illusion to still work. It all still just works every frame. One of the reasons I think we've all seen, things claim to be a revolution before or something, whatever. But in fact, they just made one department's life a lot better. Maybe they were great for a writer, they were great for a creative, or they were great for photography, but they were a real pain for others. This is one of those ones where used correctly, it's a win for everyone. And I think that's really exciting.
But you've definitely killed off an entire sort of history of memes of Star Wars geeks desperately sort of scrolling through every frame to try and spot something in a reflection that shouldn't be there. Neil, you mentioned that Sky Studios has made a big commitment to exploring the possibilities of virtual production, but can you maybe expand a bit more on why that is and where you really see the opportunities going forward?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think what Ian just said is absolutely right. There's no single opportunity within virtual production that makes it the thing that we really want to explore next. It's the fact that it touches upon every point of the production process and has the ability to enhance either the on-screen look or enhance the efficiency of the production process at every point. And the reason that I was saying we made the commitment to explore it is that it is in its early stages for us. And we actually started looking into it internally about 2 years ago. But interestingly, we spent quite a lot of lockdown when the first lockdown, when there were all sorts of issues with being able to shoot and being able to get onto stages and do anything safely. We spent a lot of that time going to our creative teams, from the creative execs through to line producers, directors, DOPs. We were sort of casting the net out to all of the Sky Studios productions to say, here's virtual production end to end, from pitch viz through to previs through to shooting on LED walls and right the way through. And here's where the value lies. But what we wanted to find out internally before we explored it properly hands-on was, is there a demand for it? And ultimately, there are lots of strategic reasons for it to work, but is it going to enhance that on-screen look? And is it going to be something that gets the creatives and the craftspeople excited? Because it's all very well to show this amazing shiny new technology, but if no one wants to use it and do the work that it takes to learn new skills and adopt it, then it isn't much use. And so we spent quite a lot of that time doing the education piece internally and with our production partners, and then doing bits of consultancy, whether it was on scripts in development or whether it was live productions that had problems because they might not be able to go and shoot a desert scene in North Africa, and they don't know when they're going to be able to get back and do that. And so interestingly, we did actually spend quite a lot of time with my team who are hands-on with game engines in Unreal, working through scenarios that could enable shoots to potentially take place on an LED stage should it not have opened back up again, or for productions that were just in development to look slightly longer term and say, okay, are we going to use the entire suite of tools going forward? But so it's strategically, there's a lot of value because it can de-risk projects by using the game engines to efficiently plan every single shoot. It can improve efficiency on set because you can use game engines to go in, block scenes, visualize them, do that usual previs, but in real time in a game engine with all of your creatives collaborating at the same time. So it sort of gets away from that linear process. I mentioned before that it drives innovation, but also crucially for Sky, is one of the things that we're exploring over this year, probably next year as well, is how we can use virtual production to contribute to Sky Zero sustainability targets. So it's never going to replace all location shoots, but what it can do is mean that some shoots where we'd be traveling 50 crew on 50 flights and probably more onto locations, there are some suitable location shoots that we can bring into a controlled set and make that part of the process more efficient. But really what it comes back to is when we looked at it as a whole and said, okay, what do our customers want? They want bigger and better content all the time. And is this suite of tools and are these skills and where this is going to lead in the future, does this have the ability to enhance that? And the answer was yes. So we're really whilst we're using the tools both in development and on some shoots at the moment, we're still in that exploration stage because I don't think Mandalorian's a brilliant example, but I think we're looking across, and I'm sure everyone is looking across an entire slate of productions to work out where it can enhance the on-screen value right across the slate.
Do you see it as more than just a production tool, though? What are the other applications for Sky?
Well, I mean, we're looking at it specifically, well, primarily for a production, for the production pipeline and process across the slate. I mean, we have started to think about what else could we do with the creation of 3D photorealistic final pixel assets early on in the process. And I mentioned beforehand that that I was running Sky's immersive team in creating VR and AR content beforehand. So so we've had to think about, okay, how could these assets work, and actually the Sky VR product at the moment is called Sky Worlds, and it's now sports viewing. But interestingly, some of the we worked with Steve over at Dimension on volumetric capture in sports, so we captured a number of different sports performers. And we're looking at, we've been looking at how volumetric capture and sports can work together. And so there are other applications, whether it's in VR in the sports world, where it's not something I'm involved in, but where our sports team present from virtual studios week in, week out. But really we're looking at, first of all, our drama slate. You know, how does virtual production work for the drama slate? And then as we really get our heads around the tools and sorry, it's not our heads, it's more as we start to educate the wider the wider Sky fold, really. It's not just Sky Studios on the tools, and they work out how they can use them. Then we can look at how it applies to beyond drama to comedy, and there's some amazing use cases we've seen in entertainment as well, and we have frequent discussions with Sky Arts in particular on how virtual production could enhance arts performances going forward. But really, it's such a big thing to even work out how you're going to enhance scripted drama content to begin with, but that's where our focus is at the moment.
No more chasing the sunset, though. Oh, I've done that in my time. Chasing the sunset to try and do a piece to camera in the golden hour as it slips down over the horizon. Kate, if we see technology playing a much bigger role in our lives, so many aspects of our lives now, especially post-COVID-19, what part do you think technology should play in today's, and well, this kind of technology should play? Is there a danger that we kill creativity by giving it too much power?
Well, I have to say, I'm not hearing that from Ian and Neil, and I can't wait to hear what Steve has to say about it. What I love is the way that they're talking about it as a tool. Technology often is an asset that tends to enhance the ability to have collaboration, to lead to a better outcome. And with my background in product management, I'm always thinking about give the person what they want, give the viewer what they want. So they're describing all these benefits that we in engineering teams see every day in the way that we work with other parts of a business. Better collaboration, better cohesion, the shortening of the time it takes to go from a concept to something that you might actually be able to start playing with and see on screen. It's intended to make the whole process better. And it actually can be shown to make people's jobs easier. And that's what you want. You want to free up the time of the people on this call and the people that they work with to not have to think about the little details, but to think about the big things and to just do that much more creating. And that's where I see technology, particularly in virtual production, obviously emerging as such an important tool. I love the story about Ewan McGregor having a great time now. He doesn't have to imagine what's going on behind him. And I think for those of us that have technology at our core, we get really excited about how creatives can push the technology, because there's always going to be improvements. That's what we do. We look at the data, we look at how people use it, we challenge ourselves. I mentioned before the company I work with, $3.6 billion of basic science research every single year, things that get folded into the way that technology is applied to people's lives. So yeah, I'm not hearing any fear, and I definitely didn't come to this panel with any fear about the potential of it. It just is there to enhance, and it depends on how you use it and how well you work together to make it effective.
This is potentially, as we've already heard, it's going to completely change the way that we think about filmmaking and on this scale. What do you think, Kate, came first, or comes first? It's the chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Is it viewer expectation and that technology rises to meet that, or do we just get, spoilt by playing with the latest technology and viewer expectation kind of catches up behind us? What do you think?
Well, it's completely speculative, but Neil mentioned the games engine. He mentioned Unreal and Unity, and you did as well. So let's consider that the gaming industry, which is very much based on viewer play and keeping people drawn in and creating the unexpected, that level of engineering of software development clearly is enhancing the ability to perhaps go further. I'm cautious about having any sort of guess about what the three other people on this panel are capable of delivering in terms of viewer experience. But I gotta say, I see the advantage that things like Unreal and Unity are giving them in how they continue to do the kind of genius work they do.
The gaming industry has always been a breeding ground for that kind of innovation. I know a lot of the sort of people who are high up in technology professions today, they often started sort of, modding for games and stuff like that. Having that kind of energy from the gaming companies, do you think that is pushing the film industry to want to be better and experiment more with these technologies?
I think it creates the opportunity to do so. I think, again, creative people are creative people. So they'll use whatever they have. And again, when I hang out with my engineers, they like to try things. They like to test things. They like to push themselves. Clearly, I'm hearing exactly the same passion for the craft from these other panelists. And I think it's important when you're committed to giving people what they want, that you're willing to do that. You just don't want to get locked in the status quo. You want to try the different. You want to expand. You want to kind of push yourself beyond what you thought you were able to do 2 years ago, that sort of thing. You can see I'm being a little cautious here. I just don't want to
right. Hedging your bets is perfectly fine.
I believe it's added value.
Perfect. Steve, you're obviously getting to play with a lot of this technology. What kinds of technology are you really enjoying working with? And what is it that excites you about that?
Yeah, I think it's, to Kate's point, I mean, the technology is almost a given. It's how people use it. Basically, it's being able to, work with a director, a production designer, a studio, all of the departments, and actually deliver what they want. I mean, one technology that's not LED volumes that we just finished doing. So we just used Simulcam on a big live action animated movie. So so what we did was we prevised everything in Unreal. The whole movie was sort of, done, but not to the final quality of the animation or anything, and then we had 3 units on set, which did the Simulcam, and then we lit the whole thing with interactive lighting from LED panels that were off camera. And they were able to cast reflections. They were able to, we were able to visualize all of the scenes of the movie, and then have, lots and lots of actors, fully immersed within this sort of virtual wrap, this light wrap, I suppose, around them. And, it was a fast-paced production. We had to shoot it over not very long. Fewer weeks than I think everybody would have liked, but it was pretty cold, so that was okay. And the benefit of it was immense. I mean, on the last day, Ian mentioned, camera control earlier. On the last day, we were using Technocranes to do all of the camera moves. So there were 3 of them, and the operators were able to previs their camera moves live in the viewfinder, and then set them, and as a result, on that last day, I think we did about 125 shots, which traditionally would have taken weeks. So it's the speed and the collaboration and the flexibility that you get out of using fundamentally a real-time process that is really, really useful. So that was one tech that was pretty interesting. In order to make that work, of course, we then also had to use 3 different types of tracking technology, because a lot of shots, are in either very small scale sets or in very large scale sets. So we actually used some sort of wideband radio technology from Formula One, to track a very large space. So, that's a set of exciting technologies. On the other side, in terms of the LED volume, I think scale is really important. So whilst I think we're all sort of within this group familiar with the creative benefits of working with a director really early on, allowing them to sort of visualize what their scenes are going to look like, and perhaps do that faster in a games engine than they otherwise could. If you think about just the volume of content being created by Sky and all of the others at the moment, and if you also consider that some of the visual effects we're talking thousands of shots that need to be done, being able to bring some of those forwards and to make that part of the filmmaking process is really important. Or otherwise, there's just not going to be enough people in the world to do these things, in short, as probably most of the visual effects companies can attest to right now. So I think the ability to make these decisions early, to sort of crystallize creative intent, not just before we shoot, but during the shoot itself, and then being able to take that forward into the post-production process is really useful. I think what I'm most excited about is the fact that editorial thread can just run all the way through the production, and at no point does it become something you have to wait for 6 months, or something that you have to imagine. I think Ian's concept of the imagination tax, I think, is a really good idea, and absolutely describes the hard work of filmmaking. So anything that makes that easier is great.
It completely mixes up the production process, as we've heard from all of you really so far. But my question to you, Steve, is in the people that you're working with, my experience of VXF and the people who do this sort of, they're normally locked away in dark rooms, sort of hidden away from sight and working sort of at their own speed and within their own sort of little bubbles. And you're putting them now really at the sharp end of the production, and also often on set and sort of live. Has that been a sort of a leap for some people? Is it because it seems like a very different kind of atmosphere to work in than the one most VXF artists are used to?
Yeah, I think nobody works in this field if they don't want to make movies and drama, right? So, and the process of being on set is obviously taxing. You're asked to do, software developers are generally given weeks to write code. On set, you're often given, an hour, if that. And most of the time, you're having to run your unit at the same pace as everybody else. So it's like, 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute are the time periods that we're generally allowed on set. And that doesn't work terribly well, when dealing with a games engine, which is enormous in some ways. But that said, you design processes and you design systems. We have people working remotely. Not everybody needs to be on set. And then those that like it are on set. And I think the process of seeing the work that you do in visual effects or in pre come to life on these huge LED volumes is amazing. So I think you're
very brave, though. We have a saying on BBC Click, who I do a lot of tech reporting for: we never work with children, animals, or computers, because none of them will do what you expect when you turn the cameras on. Well, let's move on to the next. I want to talk about the people side, about the culture side, because disruptive technologies are really changing more and more about everyday life. And for some, that's not a comfortable idea. We've all read newspaper headlines about the fear of rise of the robots are going to make humans obsolete. So let's just put this question of the culture change out of the way. Are people going to lose their jobs because of this tech? Ian?
Yeah, thanks for hitting me with that one. I'm going to, so I think the fear of the disruption and change, which is undeniable, that's only natural. So if someone is saying, hey, is this going to make me do my job different? Well, that depends, maybe. Is it going to make people redundant? That seems to be seems to me to be in many cases up to them. It doesn't really change the core thing we're doing. And especially depend, because we had a lot of this. Of course, if you're a gaffer or a grip or someone who's used to, working on a set, and here comes this guy with his computers and stuff and thinks he's going to take over all that kind of stuff. So if you're a gaffer, well, we are still dealing with the physics and emotion and craft of lighting something. Now, a lot of that light is now coming from a different source, but the good news is that, right, you can be a part of that process. Now, you might be lighting with an iPad instead of a physical instrument, but we still do a lot of physical instrument lighting. And the great part to get excited about is, have you ever wanted your light to hit like a mountain far away? Have you ever wanted to be able to control the sun and not just sort of fight with the schedule to be able to do it? There's all kinds of exciting possibilities that someone who navigates the obviously sort of occasionally tricky waters of that change can find a version of their job that they like a bunch more. And it's the same kind of, it relates a little bit to what I was saying before in terms of the collaboration, where if you're excited about that possibility of your work informing and having a conversation with other people's work at the same time, despite the challenges that presents, then that you should be excited about this.
Some of the key new roles in the volume for you guys. I was watching something about the Brain Bar. Can you tell me who the Brain Bar are?
The Brain Bar is sort of the code name we give to the people on set, usually in the just sort of, if there's a big stage, and then there's the volume within the stage. The Brain Bar is sort of a workstation set. The way we set up our teams, and teams are always different, is that there's a virtual production supervisor like myself or someone, and whose job it is primarily to work with all of the cast and crew and heads of department to be able to respond to their needs and to make sure the whole thing works, and to answer questions. How long is it going to take to do X? Can we do this? What are the needs? And then we bring experts on our team that tend to be experts in any one thing. So there'll be someone with us who's in charge of the mocap system, right? Making sure that all of our tracking works. That's the sort of secret juice that makes it so you don't need to pre-plan your camera moves. Someone who's in charge of the content. So, the actual virtual scene that's out there. Someone, we also have a colorist on set who is sort of like a digital gaffer, like another part of the camera crew. And then we actually do have some other parts of the camera crew that help work on our trackability. And then we usually have a layout person who would be in charge of how our virtual world locks in to the physical set. So they're working with the art department when a set gets made or when something gets changed or whatever. And we'll do, talking about doing things quickly, we'll do very quick photogrammetry or LiDAR or positioning scans to make sure that if that thing got built, I know no crew would ever say this would say this never happens, but if something gets built ever so slightly off from what the blueprint said they were going to get built, we need to be able to adjust our world to sort of lock into that and do that seamless extension. So we'll do surveys we'll do LiDAR in a minute or two to kind of get that turned around and do whatever. So we'll have a couple people in the volume, and then we'll have the Brain Bar sort of at the back of the stage, and so we're able to take advantage of all the cool things this can do. Because, as Steve has said many times, one of the great things, I think it's so easy to think of this in the way as before, as like a projection or footage, which we can totally do and is great, but you can also do real-time content. So if they're saying, move the sun, can you squish that mountain down? I'd like 10 trees instead of 5 trees. We can do that in a matter of seconds. And the Brain Bar are the folks who do that.
It must be quite a powerful feeling on set. Kate, there is a huge cultural aspect to any digital transformation across sectors. How do you think that this plays out in the production space?
So I'm going to guess it's very similar to any business that's trying to just get that much more in tune with customers using technology, using the digital space. And that is language. Language is often more a cause of confusion and friction than is the actual technology. Because different businesses, in this case production, they're going to have terms, they're going to have an approach, they're going to have a way of working. And suddenly they've got other people coming together. But this is the key, that is collaboration, that is building a diverse team, is that people find a way to work together. It's never easy. I can tell lots of little horror stories some other time, because it requires both parties to be willing, particularly in the early stages, just to be a little bit more patient and accommodating. But I think that the key is they will find a way to work together, because, as was said before, everyone that goes on that set, everyone that I know that ever works in a digital transformation is doing so for the benefit of their customers, for the benefit of the business, for the benefit of this particular piece of beautiful creativity. So yeah, we're human, humans make things messy, but at the same time, humans can come together and make great things.
I've seen technology change so much in my 25 years of tech reporting, and it constantly changes. So, you know, whatever we are deciding is the norm now, you know, it's going to be completely different in 10 years anyway. What qualities do you think we need to nurture in order to embrace that change? And perhaps we can borrow this from the engineering attitude, as we were speaking previously. Engineers love change, don't they?
Most definitely. I mean, I come from a business background, to be honest. And so I was grateful that the community welcomed me a few years ago. What did I learn? What do I embrace? It's all about continuous improvement. It sounds like jargon, but it's this idea of challenging yourself to make something work better. And the beauty in most digital environments is that you get data relatively quickly from the people who are using it, if it's working or not. But at the same time, not only is it continuous improvement, it's continuous learning. How much do I admire the engineers I know, like my colleagues who are at Sky and BBC and Channel 4. If they want to learn something, they take it on themselves to go learn it. They don't necessarily have to wait for someone. They're insatiably curious. So I think these sorts of ways of committing to making yourself relevant, committing to making yourself able to contribute, however technology, however the landscape changes, these are really lovely qualities that I try to do. That certainly wasn't part of the way I worked 10 years ago, because I could get a promotion just being me. But now I love the fact that I have to push myself to stay relevant and to be able to understand just how quickly change is and where it's coming from.
Yeah, Steve, Kate made a great point about, the language gap. I know in my own, working with different editors over the years, there's always a sort of a period of getting used to the language each other uses, so that you know what you want from each other. Are you finding that your teams are having any transitional issues in that respect, with the two ends of the production cycle having to learn to talk together? Which parts of the production chain are handling it well and which need work on?
Yeah, I mean, well, it varies depending on the shoot. I think it's sort of probably helpful if I just if I go through the early bit. So, in some ways. So, early on, like production design is absolutely, they'll be one of the first people that you work with when you're planning an LED war shoot, because they'll be the person conceiving of the world in which you're going to be shooting, and I found production designers are incredibly quick to adopt these tools, so they might be doing their blockouts in Modu or something like that, or even, and I've actually done this. You can take a LiDAR scan of a paper model, and then take that digitally. I have actually done that. And then as soon as they start to realize that this is a tool to not just create, the practical set, but also the virtual set, and that they will have control over both, then they make it theirs, and then they very quickly start fostering Unreal artists in their own teams, and at that point, they're a fantastic collaborator all the way through. And then, let's say the DP comes on board a bit later, because they generally do, later down the process. At that point, you can use a VR headset to sort of walk around the virtual set. You can get a sense of the dimensions of the wall, and then you can start using an iPad to sort of block out camera moves and things like that. And it's very organic. It's very additive, so each department essentially gets what they need from the process, as you go. And I find the disruption, there are some big shifts. So for example, let's say you're going to do a lot of visual effects later down the line. You're very dependent actually on how that scene is lit and how it's framed. So if it's framed in too close, you haven't got enough space for what you're going to put in behind the characters, And so we found there's huge benefit to involving the VFX department much earlier in the process, even if it's to establish things like look and lighting before all of the work has actually happened, you know, so that you don't create an unintended impact later down the chain. But I mean, I think, how can I put it? We've always felt that virtual production at the moment is a little bit of, sort of touches every department, but that's sort of not a good thing. You know, what's going to happen is each of those departments is going to absorb, you know, the parts of, and indeed are doing, absorbing those aspects of virtual production that affect them, and then they're able to contribute to the whole in the way they always have done.
Yeah, yeah. Neil, does this mean the death of, or the eventual death of, location shoots, do you think?
No, definitely not. As Steve was saying, I think it's additive. And in some circumstances, it provides an alternative or sometimes the only solution. I mean, it's very good for scenes that have an otherworldliness to them, scenes that aren't real, places where you wouldn't be able to go, maybe they're too dangerous. Let's say you wanted a scene in war-torn Syria or somewhere like that, where either you could create it digitally and then go and shoot against the backdrop, or maybe even rather than sending a crew of 20 people who, or even, you know, a small splinter crew of 8 people, who you're putting 8 people in danger. If you could get someone locally to do a photogrammetry capture and then bring that back and shoot it on the sound on an LED stage, and then it's also it's good for of places that you might not be able to go and shoot in, but are, you know, go and shoot in the garden of the White House, something like that, where actually, you know, how many people, unless you're an incredibly powerful producer, are you going to be able to go and do that? So it's a good alternative, and actually it's also additive in a way that it gives, when you're shooting on location. We're working on a scene at the moment, and there was it's quite an elaborate stunt sequence that's being shot on location, but we're also bringing it onto an LED stage for a couple of days to give the DOP and the director a broader canvas, so that they can play around and get angles they wouldn't normally be able to get, and do things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So again, create that kind of on-screen value. But also, it's not just about location, or sorry, I think in addition, it's about location shooting before you get to the point where you would go to a location. So we had a really interesting experience with a very talented young director a few months ago, who had written a script that everyone loved, and he created this incredibly imaginative, complex building for part of it. And really, it started out as a project where we just said, look, we as a virtual production department within Sky, we're here to enable the creatives. This looks very interesting. Shall we just jump into Unreal for a couple of days and build this environment to help you articulate your vision? So he sent over a line sketch, and we quickly mocked up a few basic renders, and then started coloring it, texturing it, and dressing it. And the whole process took place over a series of 2 or 3 Zoom calls. And within a week and a half, this really talented writer director, who'd all he'd done at that point was written the script. Within a week and a half, he had a world in which he could then go and virtually block out scenes and start bringing his script to life. And that's, you know, normally it would take a year to get to that point, because the script would have to be greenlit, you'd have to spend money on going and shooting, or going shooting a trailer. But then we were able to enhance the script by putting together a pitch viz trailer, and that was in the space of about 4 weeks, by just taking that script, creating a location, creating the world, then going in, putting some digital humans in there, dressing it to his vision, and then putting the virtual cameras in, and allowing him to go and try all sorts of different camera moves, and to have a look at what the people would look like, how we would block it all out. And really that helps us and helps the entire creative teams articulate the vision. And ultimately, it's a good tool to de-risk the project. And studios do this all the time. They'll create pictures, trailers, but the fact that we can use these tools at a very early stage to create a world and to create a piece of visual art that goes with a script, then everyone's on the same page from a really early point in the process as to what this vision is going to be.
I did have a couple of questions about sort of future gazing, but there are so many great questions coming in from our audience. So what I want to do is actually start jumping into some of these questions. There's been quite a lot of people asking about sort of like the costs. Is this crazy expensive? You know, Nicholas, Keith. There are a couple of people. So I'm going to think. Yeah, quite a few people are asking about costs. So raise your hand if you're okay to take this question from the audience. Brilliant, Ian. Is it crazy expensive? And then we'll hear from Steve.
So there's two parts. The answer is if well planned, no. What it is interesting is that it's the columns aren't necessarily the same. Like where you save your money, your VFX budget doesn't go down. It's other stuff that goes down, hopefully by a lot more. So it all depends. I can say that, you know, part of our metric for success and why we thought this is going to work is that we needed to be able to bring the location to the stage cheaper than it would be to take the crew to the location. So we have accomplished that. We have seen significantly less need for stages, right? Your footprint is lower. If you're doing less physical construction, that means you need less, you can do less, you know, construction staging, less moving in, all that kind of stuff. We've seen a significant speed increase. We had the same crew get up to 30% faster on a volume stage versus when they were shooting the same show on a practical stage. So all that adds up to savings. There are costs you wouldn't have, the volume, for instance, and other things, but they're more than offset by the other savings that you do get. So we're pretty comfortable saying that you can use this tool to save money, no question. One of the big ways.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, the last thing I'll say is one of the big determinants of that is, and where I think this is going in a lot of ways is, do you have to put up a bespoke volume or not? Because they can take a while, right? And so what you're going to see now, so like for Mandalorian, no one had one, we had to build one. The good news is for a lot of productions is now we've done that. And if you want to rent it for just a day or two, that's available. And you're going to see, I think, the more democratization and availability of this thing only getting stronger coming up.
Steve.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, we shot an independent movie directed by Paul Franklin in January called Fireworks. We shot it in a week, supported by Epic, on a stage. So, and it worked. I mean, I think it is suitable for even independent film, you know, and I certainly think that you can use a lot of its benefits for drama at sort of any budget. It is still expensive to rent a large volume, no question, or certainly to build one, you know, but then when you start to combine it with other virtual production techniques, then, you know, maybe it works pretty well. So for example, I mean, I'm looking at doing the big wide shots, you know, on, you know, blue screen, using Simulcam, you know, for all of that stuff. And then I'm flying in LED panel for all of the medium close-up work, you know, so you can use this stuff in combination. The money for making it work definitely does come from, you know, the production budget. And yeah, if, and well planned, you know, it can be faster and better, and you can make it stack up.
And you can see what you're getting all the way along the creative process as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Kate, question from Nicholas Glean about education, you know, talking about VP being a non-linear structure, whereas in film education, they normally teach it linearly. So what are the implications? Any thoughts on that, or anybody else happy to take that question?
Yeah, the only reason I have this look is, I apologize, I don't know that education profile for the VP. So if anyone wants to kind of cover on that, I'd be happy to pass over to them.
Do we think that are we still at the stage of the development of the industry, I guess, where that doesn't need to be sorted out yet, because we don't actually know the full potential of this technology yet anyway?
Well, so I'll throw this in. After I hand it off, I'm going to take it back. If we're talking about what does it take to develop sort of an approach to being a software engineer or being comfortable with the technology, then I would just say, again, I kind of hold myself up as an example. That's not my background. And when you start working with people who, and let's hope that the engineers that we tend to find in this area are generous with what they know, the ability to have dialogue, to talk about what is possible, how to do what is possible, can happen relatively quickly. I did enjoy coming across a study. This is a little bit of a non sequitur, but a study that came out from the University of Washington in March 2020. And it was actually challenging the assumption, and it is just an assumption. They couldn't find any science that confirmed that you have to have a really strong mathematical background. You have to have a real love of numbers to be good at software engineering. No, what they actually found in this study, and they were using all sorts of leading cognitive neuroscience methods, EEG scans and things like that, was that it was almost equivalent to learning a second language as an adult. So I do believe that the perception that someone can't get involved with this type of technology is probably a little bit misleading. I think it's very possible. It's all the way that you do it and how generous the people are that you're working with to bring you into it.
Thank you. Neil, Keith asks, when will VR become the norm in viewing content?
Oh, VR become the norm. I mean, VR is an interesting one because I think I don't think VR will become the norm in viewing content. I think for the type of, I mean, gaming is the natural place where VR has landed, and it really enhances the gaming experience. But I think the fact that VR can, viewing, it's something where you often want to just sit back and relax and enjoy with other people. Putting on a VR headset sort of takes you away from the world. So I don't think it will become the norm, but I think it is. I think it's really interesting to do something to transport you to a location. So if you want to feel like you're transported to a football stadium to watch a match with the atmosphere, there is something in that for those that want it. And it's good to transport you other places, but I don't think VR will become the norm.
Raffaella gave us a lovely message about a new production that they're working on, but it ends with the question: as a young filmmaker, I'd love to get into using this new technology for shoots, and I'm sure it will become a big part of our careers. Any advice? And I think I saw another person asking as well, how would you advise people who want to sort of dip their toe in the water and find out if this is, are we going to knock on Ian's door and ask him if we can go and play Cyberpunk 2077 in his volume or something? What's the best plan? Anyone fancy tackling that?
Yeah, I can.
Right.
I mean, you can literally replicate the brain bar using Unreal Engine, a PC, and some TVs. And indeed we do when we're not in production. That's exactly what we do. So we can look at stuff, on. So it's very, very accessible, much more so than most filmmaking equipment, to be honest. So, I mean, Epic have just put out the Field Guide to Virtual Production, version 2. There are great tutorials, and you can start working with the virtual production kit, today. There's really no barrier to entry for it.
Yeah. And Tim, this is really going to be the last question, unfortunately, because we're running out of time. But Tim asks about the sustainability benefit. Maybe you could just sort of recap why virtual production is potentially a part of the net zero mix.
Sure. Well, a big part of it is the potential that it has to replace some location filming on a controlled soundstage. So if you wanted to go and shoot a film with wide vistas in the Alps or something like that, you would be flying a crew and doing quite a technical shoot, and so you'd have the cost of all of the flights, the travel, the subsistence, and everything that goes with it. So that's one obvious part. If you bring that to a local soundstage where you could film everything that you want in a controlled way in a couple of days rather than a few weeks, then that's got an immediate impact. But also the bit that I think that still needs to be worked through is the efficiency of the shoots and the ability to plan everything in the game engines beforehand and do that pre-visualization in a way that's more efficient than often previs has been seen as quite an expensive luxury, certainly in episodic TV production in the past. For specific scenes maybe, but your ability to to plan everything out using virtual production and make the shooting more efficient, and then basically decrease the amount of time that you're going to shoot and the resources that you need to soak up whilst doing it. It's a mixture of all of those things. But what also needs to be worked through is the fact that at the same time, there are lots of very powerful servers that are going to be powering all of the LED screens. So it's a balancing effect. But I think it feels to me like it's still in its infancy. I mean, there's been amazing work over the last couple of years, but the tools are getting better and better and better all the time. So it does feel like that impact will grow exponentially over the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to spend some time talking about the future possibilities, but I think we're really at such a nascent part of the industry that maybe that's not as relevant. So I'm glad that we got the time to spend some more time on your questions. Those of you who haven't had your questions answered, I know I can see some of our experts are sort of typing answers to you as well. So it's all working brilliantly as planned. I have one last question though for Ian. Can I come and play some Cyberpunk 2077 on your volume for real?
Oh, I see. Well, okay. Well, so the key part there is could I? I mean, there are benefits to the gig. It is funny, that comes up a lot. What else can we put up there? I think, who knows? Maybe Tuesday night there might be other content on the screen. We'll see. So who knows? But there's all kinds of exciting possibilities, isn't there?
Oh, maybe I should start saving for my next birthday party. Thank you so much, all of you. I'm afraid it is time for us to roll credits on this discussion. There is never enough time, is there? Huge thanks to the guests that we have here assembled. Kate, Steve, Ian and Neil for sharing your experience and your expertise with us. And of course to the Royal Television Society for bringing us all together. But most of all, thanks to you for being here and watching it, because otherwise we're just 5 random people sitting in a room talking. So you make it what it is. I hope you have a fantastic week. Goodbye.